Well, time to talk about the NHL's most boring team.
You know,
These guys suck, right, Steve?
they really were getting out of it for a while, and I was like, you know what? They're not boring. How dare you?
Uh-huh.
And here they are.
No, this is...
They're right back at it.
This is interesting. This is interesting because it is... By the way, this is Minnesota, and the reason we're taking pot shots at Minnesota is A, Steve has a spotty history with the Minnesota Wild. B,
I forgive them now.
One of our producers, Hayden, he happens to be a Minnesota fan. Boo hiss. But also, here's where they're interesting.
Just on the graphics, Hayden, put first place.
Yeah, he'll be editing this video so here's what we got. The Minnesota Wild have been in cap hell for 3 years because they made the decision to say we got to move on from Parise, we got to move on from Suter, and that cost them over the last few years $14 to $15 million in cap space every year. This is the last year where it will cost them that kind of number. The number's 14.7. And yes, they did miss the playoffs last year, but they were somehow able to make it somewhat interesting, and they did make the playoffs the year before.
They were
It's a miracle.
competitive. They're competitive.
They're 11 points out of a playoff spot. I don't know how competitive
I mean,
that is.
As competitive as the Western Conference got.
They started off the season 5-10-4. And
That's
then
bad.
Fired D. Nevison, Creed, and then brought in John Hines. Like it wasn't great.
Yeah, but the John Hines Minnesota Wild are a much more competitive playoff-ish team.
Yes.
Or were.
Yeah, but then they ended up 11 points out. You know?
Yeah, I don't think that's
So
what
in the
happened
conference, the Minnesota Wild finished just above the Calgary Flames, but a lot of points up, like 5-6 points. They finished 10th. Okay. In the division, and it's not this division.
It's a good division.
It's a really good division.
Yeah.
It's hard to be good in this division. The Stars, the Jets, the Avs, all of them, the least amount of points you have in those three teams is 107.
And Nashville.
And Nashville with 99.
Yeah, and they're going to have more than that.
Yeah. And so the Wild were sixth in the division behind the Blues by about 5-6 points. What do we want to start with on the Minnesota Wild? Because the cap situation, you kind of have to mention before you say anything else. Not a bad-looking team on paper every year.
Well, so where do we start? You want to know my first two notes? The first one says Minnesota.
That's mean.
The second one says they're not bad, they're just fine. Which, I mean, that's them, right? Like, sometimes we do these season preview videos and we're like, this team's going to be friggin' great and they're going to go to the cup final and blah. And other times we're like, this.
Is that what we sound like?
Yeah, we sound like this. My name's Jesse Blake. And sometimes a team stinks and they're rebuilding. And we're like, okay, here's how you talk about this team, and here's what you look for in the young guys. This is just a okay team.
Okay.
Though I think they can be competitive. I don't expect them to make the playoffs. Good goaltending can take you really far. And last year was really odd. Like Philip Gustafson was supposed to take this big step, and Marc-Andre Fleury is going to sail off into the sunset. Gustafson stunk. Fleury kind of saved their bacon, and then Gustafson was like, oh, I remember how to goalie, and he was really good. So it's difficult to bottom out when you have goaltending as good as theirs, and I wonder if Jesper Wallstedt's going to get into games, one of the best goalie prospects in the league. So it'll be difficult to bottom out in that regard. It's difficult to bottom out with Kirill Kaprizov because he's so friggin' good. But it seems obvious that Minnesota has their eyes set on next year.
Yes.
And that relates back to the cap situation. Like, they have some guys who are really, really old, who I don't think are going to be there much longer. But it's like, it's Matt Boldy.
Yep.
Right? It's Kirill Kaprizov. It's Brock Faber.
There you go.
It's, yes. Yeah, I was like,
I was like, let's get to him.
yeah, come to me, name. Come to me, name. And sometimes it doesn't come to you. The future pieces of this team are very obvious, and that includes Jesper Wallstedt. But you got to get there, and it's difficult to do that with $14 million in dead cap. And you know what would be a really weird strategy? Trying aggressively to compete for a Stanley Cup with $14 million in dead cap. Maybe Minnesota being the way that they are right now is the right thing to do.
Well, I kind of like the idea that these guys kind of go for it anyway.
They'll be scrappy.
Yeah.
They're a scrappy team, but like,
You guys are not hot on their prospects.
I couldn't be lower on Minnesota as a team this season.
Oh, you couldn't be lower.
No, I think this season's kind of like, okay, We're going to hold fort. We're not going to be very good. We finished 6th last year, probably around the same area again this year. And next year we'll get good again. We have the pieces of a very competitive team. It's just the rest of it doesn't seem like much. And for a team that I don't think is trying to win the Stanley Cup this season. Every team's trying to win the Stanley Cup this season, but I don't think their goal is like, hey, Stanley Cup or bust. Like, I think they employed the right head coach because John Hines, throughout his entire tenure, has never won anything in his career.
But he's obviously a good match for the team, not because he hasn't won anything. I'm not trying to make a joke, but because things went really well for the Minnesota Wild after they got him.
Really well is relative. Finishing 6th in the division, 11 points out of a playoff spot isn't really well.
Yeah, but he can't go back and replay the first, 18 games of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was their... we don't have it in front of us, but the point pace would have had them roughly in playoff contention.
Yeah, it would have been right there.
Yeah.
Totally. But I like just John Hines' record as a head coach. One thing when I was doing my initial research for everything, I thought it was fascinating how little he's won throughout his career. Didn't make the playoffs last season. Didn't win a single playoff round in 4 seasons as head coach of the Nashville Predators. Didn't win a single round. In 4 seasons as head coach of the Devils, he made the playoffs just once and then lost in the first round.
I can't believe he's been a head coach that many years.
Yeah,
like,
so
now that you're saying
we're
it,
coming up on 10 years of head coaching and 0 playoff round wins.
Wow. Hey, he's future Leaf.
100%.
So yeah, just point blank, as his career as a head coach, he's never won a playoff series.
Jump ball up the middle was another note.
Ryan Hartman.
Yeah.
Is that your number 1 center going into
Well, it
day
is.
1?
Whether or not that's ideal, I think it is.
Eriksson Ek. Like, okay. Sometimes...
Hey, Marco Rossi's going to take a step forward.
Yes.
Yeah,
There's another young player. Like, sometimes you look at a team and you look at certain players on that team and you go, I don't know who that is, and or that player sucks. I don't look at Minnesota and do that for anybody. I just see a team that is swallowed by a bigger, better division.
Right.
Are you better than Nashville?
No.
No. Are you better than Colorado?
No.
No. Are you better than Dallas?
No.
No.
Winnipeg.
Are you better than Winnipeg? No. I don't think so. I think the conversation starts at St. Louis.
Yes.
Maybe.
I think they could for sure beat St. Louis this year, or St. Louis could beat them.
And then like Utah and Chicago and like the.
So is a
Sens-
wild card on the cards is my question, right? Because like you look at this team, like look, great young talents, Faber. Who's the other guy that just signed for $7 million? Boldy. Marco Rossi. Like there are like the great young players. Believe it or not, this is the second last year of Kirill Kaprizov's extension. Can you believe that?
Wow.
Already?
Wow, really?
He's only 27.
He was such a late addition to their roster. It screws you up.
I look at the wild card from last year. Okay, so
the Minnesota card.
It was pretty crazy. You had Predators and Golden Knights 99 and 98 points. It's rare, I think, that they're that high because if you look at the Eastern Conference, 98, and then the Caps had 91 points.
Yeah, you can make the playoffs with. Oh, you said 91.
Yeah,
that's funny. I was about to say, you can make it with 93. They made it with 91.
Yeah, and so when you look at if the Minnesota Wild can squeeze 3 or 4 more wins, we're in the conversation.
Oh, totally.
Of a Wild playoff berth,
which is totally possible.
It will not shock me if they make the playoffs. It's just if you're asking me to make a prediction today, I don't have them there. And again, like you're okay. So what's good about them? What's bad about them? They're just sort of fine all around. Mm-hmm. If the young guys take a step, that's where you get improvement, right?
That's where you get excitement too. And I would look at the Blues roster, and I think the Wild immediate future, especially after this salary comes off the books, looks a lot better than St. Louis's does. And that's
fair.
And that's a roster with Kyrou and Thomas on it. I look at this and I go, well, you've got your top. By the way, Moritz Seider's contract, as of this recording, was just signed, and he got what he got. And I just want to throw out there that Brock Faber is at 8.5.
Yep.
Moritz Seider, what happened in that negotiation? That's just crazy.
I don't know.
And it's not that Brock doesn't deserve it. Mo, I think, deserves probably more. It's unbelievable. But I just want to say that I feel like that is where you got to look to the improvements. Can you squeak in the way you did a couple years ago? And you do have the goaltending to do it.
You need the goaltending, and they got it.
And I would say that this is likely, I don't have any insight on this. This is likely Marc-Andre Fleury's last season.
It is. Yeah.
Well, I mean, So that's an interesting one because if you're not really in playoff contention, is that a trade?
I think so. I would think so. But the vibes, I would imagine, are let's play well for him.
I mean, I don't think a bad conclusion for the season for the Minnesota Wild is, we're okay, but we're not going to make the playoffs. We trade Marc-Andre Fleury, we get some assets, and also Jesper Wallstedt starts to play some games. That's great. That's a good outcome for them.
Adam was going down a direction of like making the case for them competing for a playoff spot, and you just took it to they're trading Marc-Andre Fleury, which I thought was funny.
Well, no, like they could compete for that, but I'm saying if they don't, like they're kind of in a good position.
Totally.
Like I don't think Hayden is sitting there watching this and going, "Yep, it's cup or bust." Right? There are other more stressed out fan bases.
This is a step forward team.
I think it's a nice chill. This is a chill season for Minnesota fans.
To back up Adam's point and to answer a question from earlier, once they fired Dean Evison, the Minnesota Wild went 34-23-6, which is 74 points over 63 games, which was 12th best in the National Hockey League over that span from November 28th to the end of the regular season. They had the 12th best record. So there was a lot of promising stuff from the moment they got rid of their head coach and they played the rest of the season out.
Top half of middle. It's a good way to be, man. They're not bad.
So are they Minnesota?
They are Minnesota.
Okay, then fine. Let me give you this. You guys will be blown away by this. They had 87 points last year. Guess what the betting odds are for their points?
I'm gonna say books have them really low.
Okay, what do you think?
82.
Jesse, what do you think?
0.5.
Just guess.
Yeah, 84.
The books have them at 95.5.
Oh, wow.
What?
Wow.
And that
Under.
Under? You're going under?
Under with both feet.
Jesse, are you
95? That's a huge jump.
That's a huge
I'll
jump.
take the under.
You're going to take the under. Okay. Who wants to go first? Where do you have them?
6th. It's a really strong division.
Yeah, I have them 7th and under.
I think I like them, and I want for them to have more, but I like a lot of teams better. So I'm going to say 6th as well, and I'm going to say under the 95 points.
But like there's a totally real scenario where they're competing for a wild card.
And they're in the playoffs. Absolutely.
I like them the same way I like fish sticks. They're not my favorite, but I'll eat them if they're around.